Hey, what's good? It's your boy Amaro. Welcome back to my channel. And today we are bringing you the side deck. One of the most important parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! Not only do you have your main deck, your extra deck, but you have a side deck. And without wasting any time, we're going to jump right into this. But remember, if you like the content, want to see more, or just interested in improving your competitive skill, feel free to like, follow, subscribe, do whatever. Follow me on Instagram, Twitch, all those social medias. I got them all. And we'll have more episodes. So today, we're working on the side deck. What is the side deck? I made some nice notes for you guys here. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, the side deck is a separate set of up to 15 cards that a player can use to modify their main deck between duels and a match. The side deck is used in a tournament play where players compete in the best of 3 matches and are allowed to swap cards in between games in a match. So when you're going from game 1 to game 2, you have a brief moment to decide, which is generally about 3 minutes. It is a very strict, and sometimes this can be used maliciously. Just make sure that both players are respecting the time and that you keep it within 3 minutes, especially when you're on the clock. There's usually 45 minutes in a round, and you just want to make sure that you have enough time to play and actually be able to compete and not make it to where it is an unfair advantage for each player. So just, keep that confidence. Make sure that you're telling your opponent to, hey, speed it up. Or if you see that you're kind of lagging, just kind of speed it up, make some more desirable decisions, and just kind of set them in place and get going. Because the more you can play, the more you can win. All right. The purpose of the side deck is to allow players to customize their deck to better counter their opponent's strategy. This gives the player an opportunity to counter their opponent's strategy and gain an edge in the match. Yes. So, of course, everybody knows the side deck. If you guys have been playing this game for a long time, you've been competing in tournaments, you know the importance of the side deck. This video does vary in who this is designated for, whether you're new to the game, if you're learning to be competitive and you've been playing for a long time as a casual, or if you are a pro and maybe you just kind of overlook the importance of the side deck. Hopefully you get some value out of this video. This is definitely some basic knowledge, but for most, they overlook it. You jump into the game, you just automatically know that there has to be a side deck. But how much do you really know? We're going to figure out right now. So, after a game in a match, players are allowed to swap cards from their side deck to their main deck before starting the next match. Make sure that you know the same amount of cards that go in, go out. And if you're using something in the extra deck, say you side deck an extra deck card, then you will have to remove one from your extra deck to swap it and so forth. So just make sure you're keeping the count appropriate. If you're handing your opponent an illegal deck where it's 41, 39, anything of that is considered cheating. And if for whatever reason you're caught, or if you get a random mid-match deck check, you are liable to a penalty, and that could ruin a lot for you, especially if you're on a hot streak. It's a minuscule mistake, and it happens to the best of us. I mean, it's happened to many people, I'm sure, and just make sure that it doesn't happen to you. Stay aware, stay attent. How should we prepare our deck for a tournament? Our side deck, specifically. I'm going to tell you how we prepare our side deck for a tournament. The side deck is something we need to strategically approach when heading into a tournament. We must gather resources, learn of possible strategies we may face in these said tournaments, and also we must research and study what's currently succeeding in all of these tournaments. Pretty straightforward, right? There are many things we must do to determine what kind of meta we are in. As of right now, with the release of Syac, the most recent set, we will be in a more undefined meta. We do kind of have an idea of what would be the top tier decks, which will be Super Heavy Samurais, which will be Branded, which will be, why am I having a brain fart? Gold Pirate Prunk, Purely, and Mathmech. I was having a little brain fart there, but we got them out. This is an undefined format. And though we know what decks are the best, usually when it comes down to the best 2 decks, the best deck, things like that, that's when you start to define metas. And as of right now, we're undefined until a deck solidifies itself as the best, or maybe 2 decks or 3 decks that kind of go on a triangle format, which this deck beats this deck, this deck beats this deck, and this deck beats this deck, and it goes in a little circle because this deck can't beat this deck, and this deck can't beat this deck. But eventually, both ways the triangle goes, it works. So you just kind of got to define that for yourself. If you feel like there is an inherent best deck that you do not want to play, and you know my deck is weak to this particular deck, you want to make sure that your side deck has plenty of answers to that. Excuse me. So there's a couple good tools for learning about side deck choices. One tool that we overlook is our former deck list, our past deck list. Deck list from events that we partook in prior, maybe tournaments that we partook in prior. We kind of overlook that as a tool because old side deck choices can come into new metas and be considered spicy techs, even though they're from past metas where the meta was very similar to what you're in now, and that choice just happens to work out. Cards like Anti-Spell Fragrance, cards like Heavy Feather Duster, cards like, there's a variety of cards. I don't want to just shotgun everything off my head. There's infinite amount of cards that fit into this category. However, looking at your old deck list, you might be sparked. You might remember something that you played against, or maybe something that you took out when you were doing this, and you're like, oh my god, this is just so good. Now it could work out. And when it comes to older choices, that does bring me to my first shout out of this video. Shout out to my boy Squiddy. If you have not already subscribed to that guy, I will put his link in this bio. Link for his channel in my bio, excuse me. He recently dropped a side deck tech choice for post Syac, which was very informative. He has some really spicy techs. He does bring up a lot of good OG cards that probably won't be considered for a long time, but are considered now, such as Deck Lockdown, Axe of Fools. These are just vintage cards that have worked throughout metas, and it's a good example of how past cards can come back and define a format, which is pretty impressive. So check that out. It's a very informative, educated piece, and yes, look out for him. He's great. Another good tool that we have to look at is online-based resourcing, which is going to be our OCG side. OCG is pretty much the overseas competitive Yu-Gi-Oh side of this. Japan, China, all those kinds of countries, which is, you know, very insightful because we have similar metas. Even though they play their own ban lists, things of that nature, we still share tech choices because they eventually go through our formats. They went through Tier Element, they go through Cash Tira, they go through what we're going through Syac now. And we kind of get a representation of what's good in the side deck. It's very simple. You just want to go to the following website, http://roadofthekings.com. And it's this website here. A nice little web page, a lot of ads, but gives you a pie chart of what the meta breakdown is for those events. Generally, these are based off of tournaments that they have. They're very good of keeping updates and letting people know what the tournament outcomes are and results. Get a lot of representation, and usually this will help the TCG craft their decks and their meta because they'll be on decks that we are anticipating, such as Purely and Mathmech. Look at this. They're already playing Purely, already having great success. 15 Purely, 14 Mathmech, Branded. It's insane. You know, they're on top of it. Tier Element, put this into consideration. We have these new decks, minus Super Heavy Samurai, right? But yet Tier Element is still in there. It's a sign. Which means that either the side deck choices are good or the main deck choices are good. But we'll be able to figure that out based off of this website. You come here, you go to the Purely deck. They have a really nice main deck. Shout out to Max C. Hopefully we get him back. It's 3 or nothing. But then we go down extra deck and boom, side deck. We could look at the side deck for inspiration. They have Kaijus, they have Nib, they have the triple tactics cards, the Herald of the Abyss, which is a very nice counter to cards like Nor, which are unaffected by effects that target cards or affect cards, and this affects a player, so it'll work past that, such as Evenly Match, cards like that. Crossout Designator, Evenly Match. Red Reboot, would love to have that card back. Fantastic card. Dimensional Barrier. This is an informative website. We go down and boom, we have Mathmech, and we can kind of see trends of cards that work for all decks. In this Mathmech deck, they have Nibiru as the Purely deck. We have DD Crow, XYZ Encore, which I will let you guys know this card is going to be very hit or miss This card is very impactful versus the purely matchup because it could get rid of Nor, it could get rid of the XCs that level up with the trap card. Unresponsive, it cannot be responded to. So there's a lot of like cool little intricacies with this that you definitely want to consider. Okay, side net conflict, which is interesting because in my most recent theory session with my friends, we came to the conclusion that conflict is a card that could be sided, even though it's a card you want to see going first. And this is what's interesting about side deck theory, is that cards like this, Tier Element Crime, which are cards that can be searched in a natural engine, but are used to stop board breakers, plays like that, evenly Dark Ruler, you can side for when you go first for sure. If you lose a dice roll, this card may not be good game 1, but going into game 2, because you know you're going to go first, you're going to want to set up this card, you side it. And then you take it out because you might go second again. More than likely you'll go second. And you put in your going second cards. Easy. Your spell and trap removal. And then the Link Spider, which is an extra deck card, as I was mentioning. If you're going to take out an extra deck or put in an extra deck card, you have to take out an extra deck card. This card is to counter Nibiru, because if they play in a Nibiru, they could continue to play through it with this and Parallel Exceed and go crazy. Solemn Strike is an actual very interesting card. Shout out to my boy Adon Salas. That guy's very innovative. He is a deck building genius. And honestly, he has many credentials to back it up. And recently, in the Kashtira format that we just had for the YCS 250, Solemn Strike was a card that was considered because it does help you in the branded matchup. That is a card that, because it is just so powerful against them, they can't respond to it, things of that nature, that you will be able to break boards. You will be able to play around the gimmick puppet lock, things like that. So, then we go to branded, and you can tell Nibiru's in here, XYZ Encore, the triple tactics cards, which obviously it's a good sign that those cards are probably really good. And that's how we communicate that between TCG and OCG. So this is a really big tool. And if you notice, a lot of your favorite players do resource this and do refer back to this as a point of knowledge. Excuse me. Perfect. And then, other than that, we have YouTube. There are many phenomenal YouTubers who are at every event. Shout out to my boy Slim. Shout out to my boys Asian Persuasion. Sorry, I almost had a little brain fart, but shout out to my boys. They are on it. These guys are at every event, pretty much reporting these events for you guys. They have every person who tops, every person who wins, every person who's got 8th, 7th, 6th, 5, 4, 4, 3, whatever you want. They have those deck profiles. Those are where you want to be looking. These are the people who are winning our tournaments in the States. These are the people who are local to us. This is what our formats are going to be. If one person gets first, it's because their deck building is probably superior to whoever else played the similar deck and or those people that they beat in that tournament. Most of the time, it's about the theory, it's about the crafting of the deck, and most of the times it's about your luck. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about 25% luck, I would say. The rest is crafting, theorying, and just having the best percentages and ratios, essentially what it comes down to. You do play Yu-Gi-Oh! With math. It is very important. So make sure you check them out. Shout out to them. Links in the bio for sure. Our side deck choices should generally synergize with our decks while countering our opponents at the same time. We do not want to conflict our own cards. An example of this is we don't want to use a card such as Anti-Spell Fragrance if we are playing a deck with a very large spell count. Anti-Spell Fragrance. When this card is face up on the field, your opponent or everybody has to set spell cards before activating them the following turn. So, Sky Striker, a very powerful spell deck, primarily spell cards. You would think that, you don't want to play that card, obviously, for obvious reasons. But there is a strategy that it hurts worse than this deck, and that would be Pendulum. In theory, okay? Pendulum, you need 2 scales to operate, being that they're both spell cards. They have to go into your spell and trap zone in the Pendulum scales to create skills. With Anti-Spell Fragrance, it counters this mechanic of the game, and they cannot be activated at all because they can't be set first. So essentially, they're just monsters in the hand. And that sounds like a pretty strong blowout, especially if you are being able to manage the field, the control on the board, etc. this is a pretty good strategy, I would say. So, there are just better cards in these scenarios where you could just play Cosmic Cyclone, Dimensional Barrier, just stop cards. However, if you put in Anti-Spell Fragrance into your striker deck, there's a chance that you might lock yourself out, and if they're able to push through Anti-Spell and maybe these monsters in the hand can combo and pop cards and they clear your board and your resources, but you have to set spells because that's what your deck does, it conflicts. So you want to make sure that you're not looking necessarily at the overall impact of the card, because a lot of high impact cards could also conflict with you. Another great example of that was Droll and Lockburn. Other than that, now people are just Droll, pass, InGame. Before it was Droll could harm you, it could also not, especially if you have cards that are recruiters that add to your hand. Maybe something like a Max C that draws you. Like, you know, there's a lot of variations on what could happen. How should we approach the side decking in game? I'm going to tell you how we approach side decking in game. It's like this. Now that we've come to in-game status, we must decide based on game one what type of strategy we are facing. The two easiest ways to break down a strategy is it's either you're playing against combo or you're playing against anti-meta variants. A combo deck is necessarily not many trap cards. Maybe unless they're like interactive trap cards that turn into monsters, give you advantage. Maybe that's a combo deck. But generally, it'll be a lot of monsters and spell cards that build boards that are unbreakable, etc. Build advantage based off of your combos and your lines, etc. Anti-meta is going to be more of a stop deck, a stun deck, where I'm playing trap cards to make sure that the meta decks and the combo decks cannot continue to play. Maybe that might be the likes of Vanity's Emptiness, lose one turn, just cards that say no, you can't play, and you could be facing a deck full of that. And game one, because you want your deck to be as consistent as possible, you're playing a combo deck, you're not going to play outs to that. You're going to want all gas, you're going to want to make sure that you can combo, build the board, go to game two. When you play against a stun deck, and they're prepared for that, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not playing anything, remove that, you play one floodgate, I automatically have to scoop. That's what they want. So, based off of game one, you can kind of tell, all right, that person main decks a bunch of trap cards. I'm going to sign in the back row removal. That person's not playing any trap cards, but they made a broken board. I see them summoning so many times, I'm going to put in my summon limit, etc. I could put in trap cards. So, we generally have very high impact cards against combo. We call these floodgates. Floodgates, as it would be, stop the water from moving. The combo will stop flowing if you flip the floodgate, and that's why it's called a floodgate. If we want to stop the deck from running, we just flip these cards, and they will not be able to form their broken boards. Against anti-meta, which is the stun deck, they generally have a bunch of floodgates, which are generally spells and trap cards that say no, and we're going to want to side in back row removal to remove these cards from the field, which is Lightning Storm, Mystical Space Typhoon, Cosmic Cyclone, Dust Tornado, things of that nature, which is really nice. We want to make sure that if we know our opponent's playing Summon Limit, if they're playing Skill Drain, things of that, we want to make sure that we have one card that could just get rid of it, or maybe one card that could get rid of multiple cards, like Twin Twister, where you discard a card, pop two cards on the field, spells and traps. Very powerful against anti-meta stun decks. You get the idea. You get the gist of it. So, just to give a quick example of how side decking really portrays a match, one of the best decks of its time was Lightsworns, which is a strategy that relies on sending cards from your deck to the graveyard or from the field or wherever to the graveyard to build a graveyard full of resources to be able to summon your boss monster, which is Judgment Dragon. Also utilize the effects of Necrogarna, Plague Spreader Zombie, Wolf, which all are graveyard effects. So the easiest way to counteract this was with banishing cards, monster removal, which did not allow the cards to go to the graveyard, therefore not allowing them to continue with their strategy. So cards like Dimensional Fissure, Macrocosmos, as of right now, Arise Heart, things of that counter Lightsworn very heavily because it just stops their strategies. So Floodgates stop this combo deck. See how that goes. So, how will we counter that? If we know our opponent's playing Dimensional Fissure, Macrocosmos, we're probably going to want to put Mystical Space Typhoon, Dust Tornado, We're going to probably want to put Imperial Iron Wall that allows it so our cards can't get removed, so we can just continue to just play freely, and set up our Judgment Dragon, things of that nature. For vice versa, if we know we're playing against Lightsworn, we're probably going to want to put in some more stun cards or something to protect our back row, such as Starlight Road, maybe Skill Drain, things that could turn off their monsters from destroying our back row. And this is just old school Yu-Gi-Oh references, so, you know, Magic Drain, Magic Jammer, things to stop spells and traps. You get the gist of it. So keep in mind when you're siding in, you're going to just want to determine what you're playing against. Once you get that, put in your selection. Techniques for side decking. This is pretty cool. Most people think that, you know, you just take out the cards and you put in whatever you want. There's actually kind of a psychology to side decking. When you look at your opponent and you see, oh, they're just putting in 2 cards, it has to be these 2 specific cards in your head because you've been studying the format. Let's say for Tier Element, you're playing against a deck that sides in the extra deck monster. You're probably going to assume it's Abyss Dweller because Abyss Dweller is a very high impact going first or second card against Tier Element. And if it could resolve, then you're more than likely not going to be able to do much. So if your opponent's siding into an extra deck card, you more than likely want to assume that it's Abyss Dweller. How do I know that? Because I know that card beats me, and I know if they're not main decking it, or I didn't see them make it first turn or whatever, they're probably going to put it in because it's a blowout card. There are many techniques for this. There's smoke screening, which is putting in all 15 of your side deck cards into your deck and then taking out 15 cards. This is actually a really neat trick because you kind of give no sense of direction. You don't let them like read you. You know, just put 15 cards in, you take in 15 cards. They're bound to not know. You could have took out the same ones, or maybe you put 15 cards in and it just counters them as hard as possible. They're going to figure out very shortly. Smoke screening, Smoke screening also refers to pretty much switching your whole strategy through your side deck, which is interesting because you could take out 15 engine cards and put in 15 other engine cards. So your hero deck, shout out to my boy Shaba. This guy, this is the greatest reference that I have to smoke screening. Take out 15 hero cards, put in 15 Insector cards. Now, this is a time when the game was different, so, you know, side decks weren't as impactful. They were still very valuable, but just switching the whole engine, watching your opponent, like, put in cards that would lose or beat Insectors into their side deck because it doesn't work against heroes, and then just getting blown out by Insectors, insane. So, shout out to him. There's a lot of strategies you could approach with the side deck. If you want to do something like that, it'll be fun. Siding for time. Siding for time is very interesting. You don't want to ever get put in this predicament, but generally you will have to, especially if the game was going long, your opponent was playing too slow, or maybe it was just so interactful that there was so many things going on that it just took forever. You want to keep an eye on that time because generally if there's 2-3 minutes left and you're going first or you're going second, how are you going to respond to not losing to a card that will burn you and not allow you to go into your turn? So the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! What is pretty much written right now is when the time is called, when the phase that is currently existing is resolved, and they go from main phase to battle phase, the game is over. So whoever has the highest life points at that point and the most match wins the match. Interesting, right? So what happens here is both players are on game 3. I'm going first. I see that there's 3 minutes on the clock, and I know my deck can combo for 15 minutes. I'm going to put a card that burns you for whatever amount of damage, even 100 points. And when time is called, I'm going to combo. I'm going to make sure that you can't do anything, pass my turn, and I win the match. And vice versa. It could go both ways. So, there's cards like Spooky Dogwood, which you could play on your opponent's turn. Ghost Mourner. There's cards that allow you to gain life points. There's cards that allow your opponent to lose life points, and vice versa. So, just keep that in mind when you see the clock. If it's running and you're like, oh my god, I'm running out of time, definitely make sure that you're putting in your time cards. It happens. It's a part of the game. It used to not be a part of it, but we did kind of find ourselves cycling into it when there was one point in time when you would just go into time, especially during tier element format. Everybody had their scatter shot in their extra deck because you could send it off a sprint, you could full combo, do whatever, waste time, send scatter shot, it was game, GG. Side deck patterns. Side deck patterns is a very interesting part of the game. It is the theory of what goes in and out of your deck. I use the word theory a lot because the game is pretty much a craft. It's theory. It's all hypotheticals until it gets put into motion. We're going to refer back to the Mathmech deck. So here, we're going to break down side deck patterns. If we are going into a matchup, and side deck patterns apply to every single matchup. You want it for the mirror match. You want it for your worst match. You want it for an unexpected matchup. You want it for something that you think you're going to see. When I recently went to regionals in Pasadena, California, I played Tier Elements. My deck was obviously not the strongest against Kashtira, which could be a threat at that tournament. I needed to make sure that I had the cards in my main deck that I wanted to take out, and I had the cards in my side deck where I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to consider it. I could just take these cards out, put these cards in, and it was just like that. So I'm not going to give you the specific example, but let's just say I'm going first, and I'm like, you know what? Droll Lock was not very powerful because he's playing a back row deck. I'm going to take out my Droll Lock. I'm actually going to put that back in since I accidentally took it out. And maybe I'm going to put in my Karakuris. That's what I planned in my head, and because I remember my patterns, and I'm like, okay, I'm going against Kashtira, game 2. Let's just say Kashtira, game 2. Let me just give you an example to make it easier. I'm backtracking. Bell, not very good against Kashtira. So I'm going to take out that and put in my Karakuris. Pretty straightforward. Excuse me. With that, I don't have to think. I already preemptively set this up. When I was testing, I said, those 3 are always going to come out, and these 3 are always going to go in when I'm playing against Kashtira. If I'm going against Dark World in this deck, I'm probably going to want to keep that, all my hand traps for the most part. I'm probably not going to want to play Imperm, maybe. And I might want to play like Nibiru, or maybe I want to play Lancia, because Lancia stops them from being able to do gates and things of that nature that would build them advantage. There's a lot of possibilities in this realm, okay? With that being said, you just want to make sure that you pretty much set up your side deck the same way you would with your main deck and establish it before the tournament. You want to make sure that if I want to take out these small rolls, I know exactly which cards I'm going to put in. If I want to take out my Imperms, I know exactly which cards I'm going to put in against each matchup, and have a layout. Take pictures when you discover that these 4 are best for these 4. Then take that picture, study it, and remember that. So when you get into that matchup, you're like, all right, this is what I got to do. It's second nature. You throw them in, take them out, boom, get back to the game. If your opponent's not as prepared as you are, that's a threat, because they're going to see it as, oh, damn, like he knew exactly what he wanted to do. I better like get on it. And then they're going to put more thought into it, and it might help you because you put no thought in your focus on the game. You might not have to worry about that. And maybe them worrying so much about it, they fold and they misplay, or they do whatever, and they were too worried about it, or they oversighted or overcommitted, whatever. It could help you in the long run. And then, of course, extra deck cards in the side. Back in the day, they didn't really care about you having the same sleeve on the card, so it was a lot easier for people to necessarily cheat, kind of use it to their advantage. And now, because you have to have the card in the same sleeve, no matter if it's in the extra deck or not, in the respective deck. So if you have it in the side, it has to be in the same card as every other side deck card. But if you have it in the extra deck, then it has to be in the same extra deck sleeve as every other one. And the main deck, of course. It's all the same, all around. So just keep in mind that when you're signing the extra deck card, you want to take out an extra deck card and make sure that you don't forget about it when you go into the next match, because at any point in time you could get a random deck check, and seeing that a card is still in your side and you guys didn't side or whatever, you could get a game loss for that, and it's very, very worrisome. And just kind of keep that in mind, okay? Bam. So side decking. So here we are. This is just a standard side deck. There's nothing special. This wasn't built off of any strategy. These are just very good generic going first or second cards. The reason that we have conflict and crime in here is because I want to touch back again on the theory of side decking cards that you want going first only. Crime and conflict in the combo matchups you generally want when you're going first, because what's going to happen is you're going to build a board, build a combo, and you're going to want to stop whatever push they try to make. That's where Crime and Conflict, which are both engine cards that can be searched, come in. The thing about this is that when you're playing against a anti-meta stun deck, they're not fast enough to kill you most of the times, unless it's like Labyrinth, which could put 9k out easy. This and this come in handy, because what you could do is you could break a board with Lightning Storm, you could break a board with Evenly Match, you could set this, and because it's a simplified game state, their next push won't matter unless they have all the gas, because you have a point of interaction that cannot be stopped. It's like a Solemn Judgment, but for free. But then you have your cards that go second, you have your cards that go first, and then you have your time card. It's pretty straightforward. Generally, what you want to do is these cards should be blowout cards. Magic Deflector in most matchups is game. Even in the Kashtira matchup, in the Runic matchup, this card is phenomenal. It's an insane card. We have Dimensional Barrier. We have Anti-Spell Fragrance, which is something that might be coming in back in the meta, so I'd say keep an eye out for that. And then Dimensional Barrier, which is always solid. These are all just kind of universal side deck choices, but things that you want to consider. When you're side decking, make sure that you always want to have foresight. You want to think about what could happen, what the application of these cards is going to be. If you do see it, if you don't see it, can you do anything else with it? Say both of these cards, as my 6 cards in Math Mech, can be Small World bridges, or I can use them to get rid of with Small World or Silent Mining, so they're never really dead truly. But in my deck, will I be able to have an outlet? Will I be able to have a way to get rid of them? Things you have to consider when you're side decking. Side decking is a very, very valuable skill, and I think that if you generally want to improve in your overall game, and if you want to get more competitive into the game, put some extra work in the side decking, because you will be hitting the side deck every single match, hopefully, unless your game ones are always 45 minutes, to which you should probably be playing in the OCG format, because they get one game, and they're usually very long because they have cards that extend the game, such as Maxi, make it to where you just can't push and kill somebody like we do currently, and we have the side deck so we could counteract those. So just keep that in mind. It's okay to play multiple cards, like 3-ofs, because you want to see them. Remember, if you want to see the card, you play 3. If it's a card that you wouldn't mind seeing, but it doesn't matter if you see it going first or second, or if it's your 6th card, you play 2. And the cards that are generally bridges, or they're searching, like you could search it with any engine card, which here you side the Phantom for this. Notice that we don't main deck this card because it doesn't really have much value and it's a brick. But when we go first for sure, we need to search the Conflict. With the Conflict being searched, this has more value. So we definitely don't want this going second. Neither of these, which is 2 bricks that we took out, and we made it to where when we go first, they have way more value. Keep that in mind. Here's some spicy sauce for the next format. Bam. Yeah, those cards are going to be the same. That's a side note. But hopefully you got some value out of this. This really does pertain more to the new and upcoming Yu-Gi-Oh players. So if you're new and this brought you any value, remember to like, follow, subscribe. I do appreciate you guys and the support. We've been getting a lot of traction. Videos are out there more. And I really love this. And if there's anything that you would like to see, anything that you would like to know, if you want me to get more in depth and actually focus on certain decks and how to side with them, etc., feel free to comment and just let me know. I love interacting with everybody. It's really fun and I love this game. So any way I could help my fellow duelists, I will. Shout out to Henry. Dude, I appreciate the support, and this idea, it actually came from him. When he told me that sometimes I just freestyle and hope that my side deck works, I was like, you know what? It is a very informative thing to know, and if you want to improve as a duelist, you got to know how to side deck. So with that, it's your boy Amaro. I hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you next video. Have a good one.